IELTS Reading Out Loud, Day 8. I read IELTS reading section out loud to hopefully increase my, no, hopefully develop my, no, improve, yeah, to hopefully improve my speaking skills. Part 1. The risk agriculture faces in developing countries. Synthesis of an online debate. Two things distinguish food production from all other productive activities. First, every single person needs food each day and has a right to it. And second, it is hugely dependent on nature. These two unique aspects, one political, the other natural, make food production highly vulnerable and different from any other business. At the same time, cultural values are highly entrenched in food and agricultural systems worldwide. Farmers everywhere face major risks, including extreme weather, long-term climate change, and price volatility in input and product markets. However, smallholder farmers in developing countries must in addition deal with adverse environments, both natural in terms of soil quality, rainfall, etc., and human in terms of infrastructure, financial systems, markets, knowledge, and technology. Counterintuitive hunger is prevalent among many smallholder farmers in the developing world. Participants in the online debate argued that our biggest challenge is to address the underlying causes in the agriculture system's inability to ensure sufficient food for all, and they identified as drivers for this problem our dependency on fossil fuels and unsupportive government policies. On the questions of mitigating the risks farmers face, most essays called for greater state of intervention. For his essay, Kanayo F. Nwanzi, president of the International Fund for Agricultural Development, argued that governments can significantly reduce risks for farmers by providing basic services like roads to get the produce more efficiently to markets, or water and food storage facilities to reduce losses. Sophia Murphy, senior advisor to the Institute of Agriculture and Trade Policy, suggested that the procurement and holding of stocks by governments can also help mitigate wild swings in food prices by alleviating suggested that the procurement and holding of stocks by governments can also help mitigate wild swings in food prices by alleviating uncertainties about market supply. Sheng Fan, Director General of the International Food Policy Research Institute, help up social safety nets and public welfare programs in Ethiopia, Brazil, and Mexico as valuable ways to address poverty among farming families and reduce their vulnerability to agricultural shocks. However, some commentators responded that cash transfers to poor families do not necessarily translate into increased food security, as these programs do not always strengthen food production or raise incomes. Regarding state subsidies for agriculture, Rokeya Kabir, Executive Director of Bangladesh Nari Progati Sangha, commented in her essay that these have not compensated for the stranglehold exercised by private traders. In fact, studies show that 60% of beneficiaries of subsidies are not poor but rich landowners and non-farmer traders. Nwanze, Murphy, and Fan argued that private risk management tools Nwanze, Murphy, and Fan argued that private risk management tools like private insurance, commodity futures markets, and rural finance can help small-scale producers mitigate risk and allow for investment in improvements. Kabir warned that financial support schemes often encourage the adoption of high-input agricultural practices, which in the medium term may raise production costs beyond the value of their harvest. Murphy noted that when future markets become excessively financialized, they can contribute to short-term price volatility, which increase farmers' food insecurity. Many participants and commentators emphasize that greater transparency in markets is needed to mitigate the impact of volatility and make evidence whether adequate stocks and supplies are available. Others contended that agribusiness companies should be held responsible for paying for negative side effects. Many essayists mentioned climate change and its consequences for small-scale agriculture. Fan explained that in addition to reducing crop yields, climate change increases the magnitude and frequency of extreme weather events, which increase smallholder vulnerability. The growing unpredictability of weather patterns increases farmers' difficulty in managing weather-related risks. According to this author, one solution would be to develop crop varieties that are more resilient to new climate trends and extreme weather patterns. Accordingly, Pat Mooney, co-founder and executive director of the ETC Group, suggested that if we are to survive climate change, we must adopt policies that let peasants diversify the plant and animal species and varieties breeds that make up our menus. Some participating authors and commentators argued in favor of community-based and autonomous risk management strategies. Some participating authors and commentators argued in favor of community-based and autonomous risk management strategies through collective action groups, cooperatives, and producers groups. Such groups enhance market opportunities for small-scale producers, reduce marketing costs, and synchronize buying and selling with seasonal price conditions. According to Murphy, collective actions offers an important way for farmers to strengthen their political and economic bargaining power and to reduce their business risk. One commentator, Gio Tan, warned that collective actions does not come as free as good. It takes time, effort, and money to organize, build trust, and to experiment. Others, like Marshall Vernouche and Marshall Bucheboom, suggested that in order to apply what we already know, all stakeholders, including business, government, scientists, and civil society, must work together, starting at the beginning of the value chain. Some participants explained that market price volatility is often worsened by the presence of intermediary purchaser who take advantage of farmers' vulnerability, dictate prices. One commentator suggested farmers can gain greater control over price and minimize price volatility by selling directly to consumers. Similarly, Sonali Bisht, founder and advisor to the Institute of Himalayan Environmental Research and Education, India, wrote that community-supported agriculture, where consumers invest in local farmers by subscription and guarantee producers a fair price, is a risk-sharing model worth more attention. Direct food distribution systems not only encourage small-scale agriculture, but also give consumers more control over the food they consume, she wrote. Part 2. The Lost City. An explorer's encounter with the ruined city of Machu Picchu, the most famous icon of the Inca civilization. When the U.S. explorer and academic Hiram Bingham arrived in South America in 1911, he was ready for what was to be the greatest achievement of his life, the exploration of the remote hinterland to the west of Cusco, the old capital of the Inca Empire in the Andes Mountains of Peru. His goal was to locate the remains of a city called Vitcos, the last capital of the Inca civilization. Cusco lies on a high plateau at an elevation of more than 3,000 meters, and Bingham's plan was to descend from this plateau along the valley of the Urubamba River, which takes a circuitous route down to the Amazon and passes through an area of dramatic canyons and mountain ranges. When Bingham and his team set off down the Urubamba in late July, they had an advantage over travelers who had preceded them. A track had recently been blasted down the valley canyon to enable rubber to be brought up by mules from the jungle. Almost all previous travelers had left the river at Ollantaytambo and taken a high pass across the mountain to rejoin the river lower down, thereby cutting a substantial corner, but also thereby never passing through the area around Machu Picchu. On 24th July, they were a few days into their descent of the valley. The day began slowly, with Bingham trying to arrange sufficient mules for the next stage of the trek. His companions showed no interest in accompanying him up the nearby hill to see some ruins that a local farmer, Melchor Artiga, had told them about the night before. The morning was dull and damp, and Bingham also seems to have been less than keen on the prospect of climbing the hill. In his book Lost Cities of the Incas, he relates that he made the ascent without having the least expectation that he would find anything at the top. Where? Oh my god. Okay. Bingham writes about the approach in vivid style in his book. First, as he climbs up the hill, he describes the ever-present possibility of deadly snakes capable of making considerable springs when in pursuit of their prey. Not that he sees any. Then there's a sense of mounting discovery as he comes across great sweeps of terrace, then a mausoleum, followed by monumental staircases, and finally the grand ceremonial buildings of Machu Picchu. It seemed like an unbelievable dream. The sight held me spellbound, he wrote. We should remember, however, that Lost City of the Incas is a work of hindsight, not written until 1948, many years after his journey. His journal entries of the time reveal a much more gradual appreciation of his achievement. He spent the afternoon at the ruins, noting down the dimensions of some of the buildings, then descended and rejoined his companions, to whom he seems to have said little about his discovery. At this stage, Bingham didn't realize the extent or the importance of the site, nor did he realize what use he could make of the discovery. However, soon after returning, it occurred to him that he could make a name for himself from this discovery. When he came to write the National Geographic magazine article that broke the story to the world in April 1913, he knew he had to produce a big idea. He wondered whether it could have been the birthplace of the very first Inca, Manco the Great, and whether it could also have been what chroniclers described it as the last city of the Incas. This term refers to Vilcabamba, the settlement where the Incas had fled from Spanish invaders in the 1530s. Bingham made desperate attempts to prove this belief for nearly 40 years. Sadly, his vision of the site as both the beginning and the end of the Inca civilization, while a magnificent one, is inaccurate. We now know that Vilcabamba actually lies 65 kilometers away in the depth of this jungle. One question that has perplexed visitors, historians, and archaeologists alike ever since Bingham is why the site seems to have been abandoned before the Spanish conquest. There are no there are no references to there are no references to it by any of the Spanish chroniclers, and if they had known of its existence so close to Cusco, they would certainly have come in search of gold, an idea which exists an idea which has gained wide acceptance over the past few years is that Machu Picchu was a moya, a country estate built by an Inca emperor to escape the cold winters of Cusco, where the elite could enjoy monumental architecture and spectacular views. Furthermore, the particular architecture of Machu Picchu suggests that it was constructed at the time of the greatest of all the Incas, the Emperor Pachacuti, c. 1438 to 71. By custom, Pachacuti's descendants built other similar estates for their own use, and so Machu Picchu would have been abandoned after his death some 50 years before the Spanish conquest. Part 3. The benefits of being bilingual. According to the latest figures, the majority of the world's population is now bilingual or multilingual, having grown up speaking 2 or more languages. In the past, such children were considered to be at a disadvantage compared with their monolingual peers. Over the past few decades, however, technological advances have allowed researchers to look more deeply at how bilingualism interacts with and changes the cognitive and neurological system, thereby identifying several clear benefits of being bilingual. Research shows that when a bilingual person uses one language, the other is active at the same time. When we hear a word, we don't hear the entire word all at once. The sounds arrive in sequential order. Long before the word is finished, the brain's language system begins to guess what that word might be. If you hear can, you will likely activate words like candy and candle as well, at least during the earlier stages of word recognition. For a bilingual pupil, this activation is not limited to a single language. Auditory input activates corresponding words, regardless of the language to which they belong. Some of the most compelling evidence for this phenomenon, called language co-activation, comes from studying eye movements. A Russian-English bilingual asked to pick up a marker from a set of objects would look more at a stamp than someone who doesn't know Russian, because the Russian word stamp, marker, maka, sounds like the English word he or she heard marker. In cases like this, language co-activation occurs because what the listeners hears could map onto words in either language. Having to deal with this persistent linguistic competition can result in difficulties, however. For instance, knowing more than one language can cause speakers to name pictures more slowly and can increase tip of the tongue states, when you can almost, but not quite, bring a word to mind. As a result, the constant juggling of 2 languages creates a need to control how much a person accesses a language at any given time. For this reason, bilingual pupils often perform better on tests that require conflict management. In the classic Stroop test, pupils see a word and are asked to name the color of the word's font. When the color and the word for example, the word red printed in red, people correctly name the color more quickly than when the color and the word don't match, i.e. the word red printed in blue. This occurs because the word itself, red, and its font color, blue, conflict. Bilingual people often excel at tasks such as this, which tap into the ability to ignore competing perceptual information and focus on the relevant aspects of the input. Bilinguals are also better at switching between two tasks. For example, when bilingual have to switch from categorizing objects by color, red or green, to categorizing them by shape, circle or triangle, they do so more quickly than monolingual people, reflecting better cognitive control when having to make rapid changes of strategy. It also it also seems that the neurological roots of the bilingual advantage extend to brain areas more traditionally associated with sensory processing. When monolingual and bilingual adolescents listen to simple speech sounds without any intervening background noise, they show highly similar brain responses. When researchers play the same sound to both groups in the presence of background noise, however, the bilingual listener's neural response is considerably larger, reflecting better encoding of the sound's fundamental frequency, a feature of sound closely related to pitch perception. Such improvements in cognitive and sensory processing may help a bilingual person to process information in the environment and help explain why bilingual adults acquire a third language better than most monolingual adults master a second language. This advantage may be rooted in the skill of focusing on information about the new language while reducing interference from the languages they already know. Research also indicates that Part 3, the benefits of being bilingual. According to the latest figures, the majority of the world's population is now bilingual or multilingual, having grown up speaking two or more languages. In the past, such children were considered to be at a disadvantage compared with their monolingual peers. Over the past few decades, however, technological advances have allowed researchers to look more deeply at how bilingualism interacts with and changes the cognitive and neurological systems, thereby identifying several clear benefits of being bilingual. Research shows that when a bilingual person uses one language, the other is active at the same time. When we hear a word, we don't hear the entire word all at once. The sounds arrive in sequential order. Long before the word is finished, the brain's language system begins to guess what that word might be. If you hear can, you will likely activate words like candy and candles as well, at least during the earlier stages of word recognition. For bilingual pupil, this activation is not limited to a single language. Auditory input activates corresponding words regardless of the language to which they belong. Some of the most compelling evidence for this phenomenon, called language co-activation, comes from studying eye movements. A Russian English bilingual asked to pick up a marker from a set of objects would look more at a stamp than someone who doesn't know Russian, because the Russian word for stamp, marker, marka, sounds like the English word he or she heard, marker. In cases like this, the language co-activation occurs because what the listener hears could map onto words in either language. Having to deal with this persistent linguistic competition can result in difficulties, however. For instance, knowing more than one language can cause speakers to name pictures more slowly and can increase tip-of-the-tongue states when you can almost, but not quite, bring a word to mind. As a result, the constant juggling of two languages creates a need to control how much a person accesses a language at any given time. For this reason, bilingual pupils often perform better on tests that require conflict management. In the classic Stroop test, pupils see a word and are asked to name the color of the word's font. When the color and the word match, in this case, the word red printed in red, people correctly name the color more quickly than when the color and the word don't match. For instance, the word red printed in blue. This occurs because the word itself, red, and its font color, blue, conflict. Bilingual pupils often excel at tests such as this, which tap into the ability to ignore competing perceptual information and focus on the relevant aspect of the input. Bilinguals are also better at switching between two tests. For example, when bilinguals have to switch from categorizing objects by color, red or green, to categorizing them by shapes, circle or triangle, they do so more quickly than monolingual pupils, reflecting better cognitive control when they have to make rapid changes of strategy. It also seems that the neurological roots of the bilingual advantage extend to brain areas more traditionally associated with sensory processing. When monolingual and bilingual adolescents listen to simple speech sounds without any intervening background noise, they show highly similar brainstem responses. When researchers play the same sound to both groups in the presence of background noises, however, the bilingual listener's neural response is considerably larger, reflecting better encoding of the sound's fundamental frequency, a feature of sound closely related to pitch perception. Such improvements in cognitive and sensory processing may help a bilingual person to process information in the environment and help explain why bilingual adults acquire a third language better than monolingual adults master a second language. This advantage may be rooted in the skill of focusing on information about the new language while reducing interference from the languages they already know. Research also indicates that bilingual experience may help to keep the cognitive mechanisms sharp by recruiting alternate brain networks to compensate for those that become damaged during aging. Older bilinguals enjoy improved memory related to monolingual pupils, which can lead to real-world health benefits. In a study of over 200 patients with Alzheimer's disease, a degenerative brain disease, bilingual patients reported showing initial symptoms of the disease an average of 5 years later than monolingual patients. In a follow-up study, researchers compared the brains of bilingual and monolingual patients matched on the severity of Alzheimer's symptoms. Surprisingly, the bilingual's brain had more physical signs of disease than their monolingual counterparts, even though their outward behaviors and abilities were the same. If the brain is an engine, bilingualism may help it go farther and on the same amount of fuel. Furthermore, the benefits associated with bilingual experience seems to start very early. In one study, researchers taught 7-month-old babies growing up in monolingual or bilingual homes that when they heard a tinkling sound, a puppet appeared on one side of a screen. Halfway through the study, the puppet began appearing on the opposite side of the screen. In order to get a reward, the infants had to adjust the rule they had learned. Only the bilingual babies were able to successfully learn the new rule. This suggests that for very young children, as well as for older pupils, navigating a multilingual environment imparts advantages that transfer far beyond language. Wow.